Hello everyone, it's Ruby here, bringing you guys another Percy Jackson video, and today we're gonna talk about more comments, and we're gonna really talk about this one situation that we have going on. Okay, this is also gonna be probably the last time I talk about this, because I don't want to be talking about it 500 times, and I do think that it is important to kind of just like move on, but it is also important to kind of talk about these things. And I really appreciate the comments that have been made, because most of them have been very detailed in what they believe, right? They've been talking a lot, like there's actually really a really good argument that for the most part is civil. I mean, there are some instances where people are kind of, I think, taking it a little bit too far with their comments. But either way, we're going to talk about this one subject, and that is whether or not Annabeth should be blonde. We're not going to talk about anything else. We're only going to focus on the blonde aspects. So, let's take a look at a couple of comments real quick, and this will kind of set the scene. So here is this one comment that I really actually liked, and so we're gonna kind of like enhance this a little bit so that we can kind of focus on it. Sorry for the vidIQ thing. Just ignore it. Okay, never mind. I guess that's too much. Okay. All right, let's read this comment from Percy's Cow. As a local East Asian boy who grew up with the book series, love American culture, aspiring to be a writer and actor in the Western film industry, and being aware of Asians being some of the most poorly represented groups so far, I have always valued representation through originality, merging Western heroism and with minority races, while preserving the culture context and nuances of the races the characters themselves come from. To me, that's how representation truly makes a difference in bringing minorities into a positive light and helping them shine in the Western civilization, to which its media holds the most cultural influences over the rest of the world. From the perspective of a longtime fan who views these established characters as a living, breathing being, as living, breathing beings of flesh and blood, the point and the first priority of adaptations is to bring these characters to life, all the way from personalities to appearances. Not either one or the other. If one is willing to show respect and accuracy toward actual historical beings, be it Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King Jr., I would expect fictional characters with iconic physical traits to be brought to life in the same light. Since even though both of them did not exist in the physical realm, they will remain very much real and alive in the minds of their followers. Annabeth is not just any blonde girl to me. She is the blonde girl. Her blonde hair is iconic, just like Superman is a tall, muscular, brunette, white dude in red and blue. Although technically it's black. Just technically it is black hair, not brown hair. Either way. Anyways, Bruce Lee is a skinny, muscular Asian in yellow tights, and Muhammad Ali is a black boxer wearing American flags on his boxers. That's actually kind of funny. Anyway, sorry, ADHD. I don't trust the whole finding the right actor to do the job narrative, since I have discovered the pattern where the male protagonist remains faithfully presented, while it just happens to be the female protagonists, love interests that get race swapped, or, in the specific term, blackwashed. And to me, the right actor to do the job is one who acts the part and looks the part. People aren't mad that minority races are included in a series. They are mad that the image of their beloved characters are getting replaced. And African Americans, which just happens to be the largest minority group in the US, in turn, the second largest racial group on the continent, just so happens to be the ones responsible for it, even though they already have distinct cultures and racial identities linked to the country's history. To me, it just reinforces black people's stereotype of taking something that isn't theirs. That it is only by assuming the identity of a race historically deemed superior to them in the social hierarchy, forcing their cultures and identities onto not just American media, but also that of European and even Asian-inspired works. In a way, that's very invasive compared to the less represented minority races, in order for them to gain validation and success. Why is it that a character's racial identity only matters when he or she plays the racial card? Woe is me, I'm black, poor, and discriminated. Woe is me, I'm white, and my ancestors are colonizers. Woe is me, I'm Asian and suffer a terrible childhood because of my possessive, abusive parents. Why can't a character be allowed to stay the way they are, just being who they are, without emphasizing on their identity crisis, insecurities, and self-pity? If white characters are considered the default and replaceable hand-me-downs, because original characters, stories, and intellectual properties featuring other races are considered too much trouble to achieve the diversity that the industry strives for, doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of representation itself, to present their identity, culture, and ideologies before the rest of the world? That diversity is misread and reduced to pouring a bucket of black paint over existing paintings, simplified to be how many non-white people there are, while it was actually built upon differences and contrast, the peaceful coexistence of appearances, identities, cultural and ideologies of various sorts. I disagree with Riordan's decision to change up the core character's race after preserving distinctive physical features for over a decade. The fact that he possesses the authority of the series' creator is of little influence to my judgment. To me, a character's existence is built on the combination of the soul, and the voice. The absence of either compromises the integrity of it all, mute ones being the exception. If recasting an existing character with different features changes the shell drastically, and so does changing something as simple as a person's hair color, then so does switching up the character's entire race, thus changing the cultural and family background, skin tone, and facial structures, resulting in misrepresentation and inconsistencies of pre-established characters. I respect the author's casting decisions regardless of my disagreements, though I will never be able to accept the results as the definitive versions of the characters I've grown up with for a decade. Not with the likes of ones established by Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. It will always remain an adaptation, and an adaptation alone, an alternate story set in a different universe and different medium, while the definitive representation and integrity of the characters remain in books, graphic novels, and cover arts. as they may always be for the rest of my lifetime. The dreams of a faithful Percy Jackson adaptation is vanquished once again. And this time, it is the author himself that has broken this very promise. And then people, for the most part, agree. And then, okay, so let's also touch on these comments as well. Okay, so Pluto says, I don't particularly care that Annabeth has been race-bended, in a sense that I hate this show now and I won't be watching it. But it does disappoint me that she was race-bended, because she was written as a white girl. She's coded white. She was meant to be a white and a white background. Whatever anyone wants to say about her description, about how she doesn't have to be white, keep the same energy if a character such as Leo is race-bended. His ethnicity doesn't matter to his character either. His entire background is built up around how he was poor and bullied, and then started a fire in his mom's workshop, thus killing her. A white person could experience that, so does it matter that Leo is white? Yes, it would. Everyone would flip out if he was whitewashed. But Annabeth? Apparently being white doesn't matter. It's the default. It's basic, and it's unimportant. Like, if it just it just comes off as very belittling and unfair, as well as the double standard, it also by race bending any character is inherently changes their backstory. A white person experiences a different upbringing than POC. It's just a fact. So for Annabeth to be black, would mean her background is changed. It also changes her Norse background, which, fine, a black person can be of Norse descent, but again, keep the same energy for when an African American character gets whitewashed and has deep African roots. A white passing kid that can have those too. White people marry and have kids with black people. Mixed kids can look white passing, but it's suddenly not okay if it's a white actor playing an iconic black character. Diversity is important. I agree. We need more representation for POC characters, but race bending and turf wars over what character should be POC and what character should be white is not how we should do it. If Rick needed POC characters, he should have gone with picking characters that's race ethnicities were ambiguous and or had very little description about them, such as Chiron, Dionysus. He could change his form to whatever he wanted. Being POC is not out of the realm of possibility. Carice, very little description about her, and very important character. So we kind of get the idea of different people's perspectives. I'll even highlight this one character. This one poem, by the way. I just asked, do you like Annabeth Chase's casting? 29% says yes, 36% says no, and 35% says I'll wait for the Disney Plus series. And Jamaica says, this is a little bit long, but basically the same kind of notion. And I do want to talk about this because there is some misinformation being spread in order to defend why Annabeth was casted not as like a natural blonde, for example. And there is some people on Twitter, and they do exist, so I don't want people saying, well, I don't see that. I saw it with my own eyes, don't gaslight me. But some people were saying that we're talking about how the blonde hair shouldn't matter. What is everyone's obsession with blonde hair? Now, with that being said, I do want to take some textual evidence. Okay, I want to point out some things that were written in the books. Now, I just want to preface to say I do own these books, but in order to show them, I did need to find PDF versions, so I did not. Look, I own the books, okay? I just don't have them all on hand, and it would be inconvenient to show them. So here we go. Oh, sorry. All right, so let's talk about it. So this is from The Lightning Thief, and I went ahead and kind of highlighted some very important things when we're discussing the ideas of whether or not it's important or not. I thought, okay. Okay, how the fuck? Okay. Anyways, let me just here it is. Okay, so okay, here we go. So on page 5, this is page 5 of The Lightning Thief. It's in the chapter I play. Actually, I think this is like right when Percy, faints, basically. And it says, "The last thing I remember is collapsing on a wooden porch, looking up at a ceiling fan circling above me, moths flying around a yellow light, and the stern faces of a familiar-looking bearded man and a pretty girl, her blonde hair curled like a princess's. They both looked down at me, and the girl said, 'He's the one. He must be.' 'Silence, Annabeth.' The man said, he's still conscious. Bring him inside.'" Okay. We'll talk about this in a minute. And then here on page, what page is this? I don't know what page this is. Anyway, I think this is like right afterwards, pretty much. Okay. With a horse. I must have woken up several times, but what I heard was but what I heard and saw made no sense. So I just passed out again. I remember lying in a soft bed, being spoon-fed something that tasted like buttered popcorn. Only it was pudding. The girl with curly blonde hair hovered over me, smirking as she scraped drips off my chin with the spoon. And yeah, we get the idea that is Annabeth. And then again, I guess page 47 on the PDF. It says, "Down at the end of the porch, 2 men sat across from each other at a card table. The blonde-haired girl who'd spoon-fed me popcorn-flavored pudding was leaning on the porch rail next to them. The man facing was small but porky. He had a red nose, big watery eyes, and curly hair so black it was almost purple. He looked like those paintings of baby angels. What do you call them? Hubbubs? No, cherubs. That's it. He looked like a cherub who'd turned middle-aged in a trailer park. He wore a tiger-patterned Hawaiian shirt, and he would have fit right in at one of Gabe's poker parties, except I got the feeling this guy could have outgambled even my stepfather. "That's Mr. D," Grover murmured to me. "He's the camp director. Be polite. The girl, that's Annabeth Chase. She's just a camper, but she's been here longer than just about anybody. And you already know Chiron." Right? So now Percy clearly knows their names. Okay? He knows their names. And yet, And then yeah, if you just look down the page, right? he refers to he talks about his Latin teacher. He talks about right Mr. D, and he says Annabeth. And there's like Annabeth, Mr. Bruno called to the blonde girl. Sorry. We'll just read this whole thing. Annabeth, Mr. Bruno called to the blonde girl. She came forward, and Mr. Brunner introduced us. This young lady nursed you back to health. Percy, Annabeth, my dear, why don't you go check on Percy's bunk? We'll be putting him in cabin 11 for now. Annabeth said, sure, Chiron. She was probably my age, maybe a couple of inches taller, and a whole lot more athletic looking. With her deep tan and curly blonde hair, she was almost exactly what I thought a stereotypical California girl would look like, except her eyes ruined the image. They were startling gray, like stormy cloud eyes. Pretty, but intimidating too. As if she were analyzing the best way to take me down in a fight. She glanced at the Minotaur horn in my hands, then back at me. I imagined she was going to say, you killed a Minotaur, or wow, you're so awesome, or something like that. Instead, she said, you drool when you sleep. Then she sprinted off down the lawn, her blonde hair flying behind her. Okay? And then we also have this instance. Wait, I think I already looked at that instance. This instance. Oh my god. Okay, there we go. Wait, what? What is going on? Okay. Chiron seemed to turn hard of hearing again. Oh, look, he said. Annabeth is waiting for us. The blonde girl I'd met at the big house was reading a book in front of the last cabin on the left, number 11. When we reached her, she looked over me critically, like she was still thinking about how much I drooled. I tried to see what she was reading, but I couldn't make out the title. I thought my dyslexia was acting up when I realized the title wasn't even English. The letters looked Greek to me. I mean, literally Greek. They were pictures of temples and statues. There were pictures of temples and statues and different kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book. Annabeth, Chiron said, I have master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here? Yes, sir. Cabin 11, Chiron told me, gesturing toward the doorway. Make yourself at home. So clearly, and this is the first book, by the way, and even though Percy already knows Annabeth's name, he still continues to refer to her as the blonde girl. It's actually kind of comical, and it's very much a Percy thing to do. Where even after knowing her name, like literally he was told her name like 5 times, and he still refers to her as the blonde girl. So there is no mistaking that the blonde hair is a very important feature in the books, right? And then I'm not gonna look through every single book. I do know that it is referenced a lot through the books. Like, in the main series, it is referenced so many times. In fact, the word blonde actually comes up a lot. It seems to be a very important feature. But I will point out in The Last Olympian, okay? You can even see that I was looking up the word blonde. Okay. Let's go over here. This is from The Last Olympian. This is like... Yep. Annabeth ran in right behind him, and I'll admit my heart did a little relay race in my chest when I saw her. It's not that she tried to look good. We'd been doing so many combat missions lately, she hardly brushed her curly blonde hair anymore. And she didn't care what clothes she was wearing, usually the same old orange camp t-shirt and jeans, and once in a while her bronze armor. Her eyes were stormy gray. Most of the time, we couldn't get through a conversation without trying to strangle each other. Still, just seeing her made me feel fuzzy in the head. Last summer, before Luke had turned into Kronos, and everything went sour. There were a few times when I thought maybe, well, that we might get past the strangle each other part. What happened? She grabbed my arm. Is Luke? The ship blew up, I said. He wasn't destroyed. I don't know where. Selena Beauregard pushed through the crowd. Her hair wasn't combed, and she wasn't even wearing makeup, which wasn't like her. Where's Charlie? She demanded, looking around like he might be hiding. I glanced at Chiron helplessly. The old centaur cleared his throat. Selena, my dear, let's talk about this at the big house. No, she muttered. No. She started to cry, and the rest of we get the idea. I also want to point out over here. Then I noticed the framed picture of the mantle, and I froze. It was exactly like Rachel's sketch. Luke, around 9 years old, with blonde hair and a big smile and 2 missing teeth. The lack of a scar on his face made him look like a different person, carefree and happy. How would Rachel have known about that picture? I highlighted this because I just want to point out that blonde shows up a lot. It is a very important description when defining certain characters. Like, throughout the books, there's like the blonde dude, the blonde girl. She was blonde. I just want to point that as something kind of funny. And then the last point I also want to make is over here. Thalia glanced at Luke. He counted silently 1, 2, 3. He ripped away the tin, and a little girl flew at him with a hammer. Whoa, Luke said. The girl had tangled blonde hair and was wearing flannel pajamas. She couldn't have been more than 7, but she would have brained Luke if he hadn't been so fast. He grabbed her wrist, and the hammer skittered across the cement. The little girl fought and kicked. No more monsters! Go away! It's okay. Luke struggled to hold her. Thalia, put your shield away. You're scaring her. Thalia tapped Aegis, and it shrank into a silver bracelet. Hey, it's all right, she said. We're not going to hurt you. I'm Thalia. This is Luke. Monsters! No, Luke promised. But we know all about the monsters. We fight them too. Slowly, the girl stopped kicking. She studied Luke and Thalia with large, intelligent gray eyes. You're like me, she said suspiciously. Yeah, Luke said. Well, it's hard to explain, but we're monster fighters. Where's your family? My family hates me, the girl said. They don't want me. I ran away. Thalia and Luke locked eyes. I knew they both related to what she was saying. "What's your name, kiddo?" Thalia asked. "Annabeth." Luke smiled. "Nice name. I tell you what, Annabeth. You're pretty fierce. We could use a fighter like you." Annabeth's eyes widened. "You could?" "Oh, yeah." Luke turned his knife and offered her the handle. "How'd you like a real monster slaying weapon? This is celestial bronze. Works a lot better than a hammer. Maybe under most circumstances, offering a 7-year-old kid a knife would not be a good idea, but when you're a half-blood, the regular rules kind of go out the window." Annabeth gripped the hilt. "Knives are only for the bravest and quickest fighters," Luke explained. "They don't have the reach or power of a sword, but they're easy to conceal, and they can find weak spots in your enemy's armor. It takes a clever warrior to use a knife. I have a feeling you're pretty clever." Annabeth stared at him with adoration. "I am." Thalia grinned. "We'd better get going, Annabeth. We have a safe house on the James River. We'll get you some clothes and food. You're not going to take me back to my family," she said. "Promise?" Luke put his hand on her shoulder. "You're part of our family now, and I promise I won't let anything hurt you. I'm not going to fail you like our families did us. Deal?" "Deal," Annabeth said happily. "Now, come on," Thalia said. "We can't stay put for long." Okay. So we get the idea that, the blonde hair is pretty big aspect, so much that it is repeatedly mentioned throughout the books, at least like 5 times per book. And then we're going to talk about the Mark of Athena. Oh, I spoiled it. Okay. We're going to start from the beginning, though. So we have this part where it says, she knelt next to Leo. Her gray eyes were as steely as ball bearings. Her blonde hair fell loose around her shoulders, but Leo didn't find that attractive. He had no idea where the stereotype of dumb, giggly blondes came from. Ever since he'd met Annabeth at the Grand Canyon last winter, she'd marched toward him with that "give me Percy Jackson or I'll kill you" expression. Leo thought of blondes as much too smart and much too dangerous. And then we have over here, at first Percy thought he was still asleep. When he'd lost his memory, he'd spent weeks dreaming about Annabeth, the only person he remembered from his past. As his eyes opened and his vision cleared, he realized she was really there. She was standing by his berth, smiling down at him. Her blonde hair fell across her shoulders. Her stormy gray eyes were bright with amusement. He remembered his first day at Camp Half-Blood 5 years ago, when he'd woken from a daze and found Annabeth standing over him. She had said, "You drool when you sleep." She was sentimental that way. Okay. And then we have this instance. Annabeth gasped. The woman was breathtakingly beautiful and strangely familiar. Her face was hard to describe. Her features seemed to shift from those of one glamorous movie star to another. Her eyes sparkled playfully, sometimes green or blue or amber. Her hair changed from long straight blonde to dark chocolatey curls. Annabeth was instantly jealous. She'd always wished she had dark hair. She felt like nobody took her seriously as a blonde. She had to work twice as hard to get recognition as a strategist, an architect, a senior counselor, anything that had to do with brains. And then finally, over here, Octavian made a squeaky sound. What was that for? I didn't say toss it. That could have been evidence or spoils of war. Annabeth tried for a dumb blonde smile, like, "Oh, silly me. Nobody knew her would. What? Nobody who knew her would have been fooled." But Octavian seemed to buy it. He huffed in exasperation. "You other two," he pointed his blade at Hazel and Piper. "Put your weapons on the dock. No funny biz, I guess." All around the Romans, Charleston Harbor erupted like a Las Vegas fountain, putting on a show. When the wall of seawater subsided, the three Romans were in the bay, spluttering and frantically trying to stay afloat in their armor. Percy stood on the dock, holding Annabeth's dagger. "You drop this," he said, totally poker-faced. Annabeth threw her arms around him. "I love you." "Guys," Hazel interrupted. She had a little smile on her face. "We need to hurry." Down the water... Okay, we get the idea. I'm just reading the book at this point. But it is very important to kind of talk about this idea of whether or not appearances matter, and specifically Annabeth's appearance. Does it truly matter? And I also want to kind of pivot a little bit and kind of go over to here, and here being the Wikipedia for Annabeth Chase. Okay, so this is the Wikipedia. This is the Reardon Wiki. It's pretty accurate. Okay, and one of the things that I want to go to is appearance, and it says, and I quote, "Annabeth has tanned skin and a slender, athletic body. She has long, honey blonde hair set in perfect princess curls like Cinderella. Percy said that she looked like a typical California girl, except that her stormy gray eyes ruined her image. As revealed in the Mark of Athena, she has a belly button despite not being born in the usual way. In the same way, Aphrodite Venus noted the beautiful young lady she'd grown into. Despite being taller than Percy originally, Annabeth is now shorter than him, standing at 5'11", while Percy stands around 6 feet. Although her hair was said to have a streak of gray as of the Titan's curse, due to the pressure of holding up the sky, she already lost it by the Mark of Athena. By the hammer of Thor, Annabeth has started growing out her hair, and the way it caught in the sunlight briefly reminded Magnus of Sif. So, I think it is deceptive to say that the blonde hair doesn't matter, because it does matter to Annabeth, because it is the first thing Percy sees, the first impression that we have of Annabeth in the entire series is that she is blonde. It is one of the only features that we do know of Annabeth. Now, in terms of the skin tone, I don't think that really matters. However, when we think of typical Californian, what do we think of? We think of someone like Katy Perry or like, the California girl. And I'm sorry, but the California girl it is a very iconic look. It's a very specific look. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't be changed. It just means that it would be wrong to say that it wasn't important, because it clearly was, because it was mentioned throughout the books, through all of the books, multiple times. Like, it was mentioned multiple times. It was not mentioned just once. It was not insignificant. That is lying. Or it's just misremembering. Okay? And I do think that when we're talking about adaptations, appearance does matter. Because and I think people have already said this many times, but it seems that appearance doesn't matter as long as they're white, right? It is very... No one would approve, not one person would approve of let's say, Martin Luther King Jr. being portrayed by a white man or an Asian man. Likewise, no one would approve of Black Panther being portrayed as a white man or an Asian man, because it's not who they are. And in fact, this is something that has actually been brought up a few times when there was a significant amount of whitewashing and even Asian washing, where, we talk about like The Last Samurai, for example, where the Last Samurai is a white man. Now, it's not necessarily... It's like when there's the constant idea of Asians being portrayed by white people who are not Asian. And as someone who is Korean, I do find representation important. I want to see more Asians in the media. But what I don't want to happen is characters that already exist suddenly becoming Asian. That is not representation. You can say that Annabeth's appearance doesn't matter, but I don't think it's right to say that this is sufficient representation. Because in the truth is, it is not. If you're saying that the only thing that matters is the physical representation, I don't agree with that. That is not enough to portray an Asian, a white person even, or even an African American, or even an African, right? Imagine this, okay? And if appearance truly didn't matter, imagine a movie set in Africa, like North Africa, and it tells the story of someone who resembles a lot of African characteristics, but is physically a different ethnicity. What would be the immediate reaction to that? And people will say, oh, it's just fiction, it's fictional characters, it's just a drawing, it's not real, these people don't have real emotions. But to us, to a lot of people, These characters matter a lot. They matter a lot. And that goes with physical appearance as well. Now, I will reckon also that this is not the first time someone has been race swapped. And I do think this is an issue where we're setting the precedent that race swapping is okay. And that's wrong. Because it's not okay. In the same instance where you wouldn't want a Mexican character being portrayed by a black character, or a black character being portrayed by a white character, or an Asian character being portrayed by a white man or a white person, you wouldn't want... If we start allowing appearances to be altered, we have to keep that same tempo, and I really doubt that anyone would be okay with Hazel being portrayed as any ethnicity other than black. Right? Now, there is kind of, like, we were told, right, that these auditions were colorblind, and I do think that they were. The question is whether or not they should have been in the first place. Because it's not that because each character is a significant idea. You know, I don't know who Linnea Jeffries is, and she might very well be a very good Annabeth. But it does change the story. It does change the story that we know. And I think that's valid to point out. Now, I don't agree that this is, like... I don't agree that this move is for woke purposes, as people will say. But I do agree that this isn't an authentic adaptation. I'm okay with them taking a different path, but it would be deceptive to say that this is an accurate representation of Percy Jackson. Because as soon as you begin to alter one person, you do have to understand that it's going to change the story. Appearances play a big role in our society. Ethnicities play an even bigger role. If you think that people were harsh on Alexandra when she was playing Annabeth and didn't dye her hair, imagine people's reaction if Linnea Jeffries does not dye her hair either. And I also don't agree that hair is insignificant in the sense that we don't have to worry about hair, that we shouldn't be concerned with hair. Because hair is a big way that people express their identity. Especially when it comes to, like, the black community, and even the Asian community, and even everywhere. Hair does matter. Why do you think we feel bad for a person, let's say a cancer patient, who has to go through chemotherapy and ends up losing their hair along the way? Why do you think we care about when people begin to bald? When people can't control their hair loss? When people ruin their hair even? It's because hair matters. Hair is a big part of culture and representation. It's so big that there are a lot of stereotypes and a lot of stigma behind the type of hair that people have. For example, I have dark brown hair. As a Korean, that is a big deal, okay? It is a huge deal. I have a hair color that is not common in South Korea. It's not. Likewise, in Japan, hair is a huge aspect of their culture, to the point where they have laws regarding the hair color that you have to have when attending schools, to the point where they will enforce dyed hair to make it black hair. And on top of that, there has been a consistent amount of stereotypes, harmful stereotypes, that revolve around the person's hair color. The whole idea of gingers have no soul revolves around the stereotype around people with red hair, to the point where people thought that people with red hair were spawns of Satan, or were there's so many stereotypes revolving around hair, and blonde hair is not an exception. In fact, blonde hair is often associated with people who are dumb, people who have certain characteristics, certain personalities. It's stupid, but it does matter. It's part of history. It is a part of history that cannot be denied. And even though we're in a society that has, for the most part, moved on from that stereotype, there are still people who feel harmed by that way, by those actions that were caused due to their hair color, due to the hair that they had. There was even prejudice against people who have naturally curly hair versus naturally straight hair. There, especially among women, hair does matter. It matters a lot. It doesn't matter. Like, to me, like, my hair is one of the things that I love about me. I love my hair. To the point where I would never do anything permanent to my hair. I don't plan to dye it. I don't plan to, I just don't mess with my hair. It's just like when you try to force someone to cut their hair. That is also something that is not okay. Hair matters a lot. And I don't like the idea of having to diminish people for caring about hair because Annabeth or even Percy don't have the correct hair. When we think of people, one of the first things that we recognize is their hair color, their eyes, and facial features. It's just a part of human nature. We notice hair. We notice eyes. We notice other features too. But when people talk, if hair didn't matter, right? Why do you think we specify when we're giving a description for the police, the hair color, the skin tone, the eyes? We give as much features as we can when describing people. In that sense, physical appearance does matter. And it matters also in the media. Now, I don't want to make this an oppression Olympics, if we want to call it that, where we compare who had it worse. I'll be honest. Everyone has had it bad. Everyone. Everyone has had it bad at some point in history, and we would like to move on from that, but at the same time, we can't, because people are still hung up about the things that have happened in the past, which is fair, right? That is a fair thing to do, because it is part of your history. It is part of your culture. And I think about the patterns that we have seen through media. There is this idea that white women can just be replaced. And if it's a few instances and the appearances truly don't matter, then I don't think that's necessarily a problem. But when we're talking about characters, for example, the little orphan Annie, who is known for having ginger hair, or even Barbara Gordon, who's known for having red hair, or even Starfire, who is known for having orange hair. The skin tone might not matter. That is true. But the hair does. It matters a lot because in many instances it is a distinctive feature that these characters have. And while I don't necessarily mind the actresses who have portrayed these characters, I also find it weird that this is becoming a commonality. And I don't think that this is proper representation for anybody. Because it's taking a character that already exists and simply just changing their appearance. And by doing that, you tell the world, you tell these people that that is significant representation to the point where it's becoming a common thing to do. Because you've told Hollywood that you don't have to be original, you just have to include us. And I find that very problematic because it stops Hollywood from making actual stories that does represent those groups and instead allows them to take a cheaper route to represent a group through mix and match, replacing, swapping, and that's not okay for anyone. And it's not like characters. What I always find it interesting is it's the characters that have specific descriptions of like white features and blonde or ginger hair that always get replaced. And it's never the ones that have ambiguous descriptions that could be anything. Now let's put it this way. If you're not okay with non-white people or non-white characters being replaced by white people, then why are you okay with white people being replaced by, or white characters, I should say, being replaced by non-white people? I do think that there is a bias behind that. And I think it's weird to say that hair doesn't matter or that appearances don't matter, because at the end of the day, it does matter. Why do you think Tiana was so significant when her movie came out? It's because it was the first time we truly saw a proper representation of POC in a Disney movie, in a Disney animated movie. Previously, we also saw Pocahontas, who has her own problems. And then we also had Mulan, who is also significant. And the whole idea, for example, of the Disney Princess line is to represent young girls all over the world, of all people. Now, initially there was a problem that there wasn't enough representation. But now there is. There's a lot more representation, and there can be even more representation without sacrificing the representation that is already there. For example, in the DC Universe, and I bring this up a lot because I praise DC Universe for having a very diverse lineup, because they do. They have so many characters, so many different people that can be used. There's Jon Stewart. There is Steel. There is Cyborg. There's a lot of characters of different ethnicities, different identities, different backgrounds. And when you begin to change one, you begin to change them all. Because you say, this is okay, even though there are plenty of characters that already exist, that already represent those people. People bring up Hazel. People bring up Piper. But also, there are a lot of things that you can do with something that is based on the Greek myths to have a very diverse lineup. And one thing I did mention is the fact that there are very few Asians within the Percy Jackson series. Like, genuinely, there is. I mean, sure, there's Frank, but in general, right, we Asians also suffer the same problem. And while I would appreciate if certain characters were turned Asian, it would not be enough for me to call that representation. Maybe if it was a new character added, or maybe if it was... Because here's the thing, people talk about how the books, like, how in the books, like, we don't see, like, POC people until, like, book 6 or whatever. But that's not true. Okay? We see a lot of POC people within camp. And people say, oh, well, but they don't have significant roles. Well, I mean, if they're adapting the series, you can easily include them more. Especially since we do know that it's probably not going to be, like, word for word, the Percy Jackson series, because all of the Percy Jackson series is told first person in Percy's POV, so obviously some things are going to have to change. And part of that can be character roles. There's a lot of characters that are absolutely loved. They can easily have bigger roles. For example, Selena Beauregard. Another example would be Charles Beckendorf, who is black. At least, I think he is. There's just so many characters. I mean, there's so many people that can easily be altered, easily be changed. And in some cases, I do kind of agree that, you know, I do kind of agree. I also think that it is also weird how much focus was on the physical appearance on all sides, because there truly was a lot of talk about whether or not Annabeth should be black or white, to the point where it was just weird. It was strange to look at. Now, I'm a person who genuinely, I trust Rick, I do, and I hope that he is right, but I do have to wonder, because, I mean, it is Disney, how much influence he had, and how much, like, I would genuinely believe that Rick decided to do a colorblind test. Like, that makes sense. It does make sense. But this is the man who did promise that this would be our series. This would be, an accurate adaptation. I don't know. It's too late now. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna do anything to change anything. And who knows how much was Rick and how much was the studio itself. I do think that it is kind of time to move on. And I do think, truly, no matter what you think, this isn't the cast's fault. So going after the actors, going after the actress, not okay. Okay, you're gonna I believe, and this will be my belief probably forever, that yes, appearance is important. But it's only important to a certain degree. And I don't agree with blaming it on the actress, putting that hate on the actress, or even putting the hate onto Rick or the crew or anyone, really. It's okay to not like the decisions. It's not okay to go after them for their character, for the person that they are. Like, what's done is done. It's not going to change. And at this point, we might as well just move on. And that's what I plan to do, at least. And I also don't think that you should go after people who are deciding to make art based off of the Disney Plus cast. Or even people who decide to stick with book Annabeth and want to depict book Annabeth. I really, really want to condone the idea of making this a racial thing, to making this political, right? The Percy Jackson fandom is better than that, is more than that. And I truly believe that. I do think that it is fair for people to not like this decision. I also think that it's not okay to then turn that into negative energy, into campaigning against this. In my mind, I saw this coming. As soon as there was even an idea of Annabeth's appearance changing. Even the fact that, Walker's hair might not change. That the appearances might not actually be changing. Like, people talk about Walker as well, and also talked about why people were obsessed with Percy having black hair. But again, if hair didn't matter, then why would it matter if he does dye his hair? Like, it's very strange, the arguments that people come up with on both sides. Okay, on both sides. I hope that this doesn't affect the series too much. I know that it probably will a little bit. But, I'm still optimistic. And I do think that no matter what happens with the Disney Plus series, the books will always be there. And the books are truly, truly what matters. Because, I mean, it does. And there was also, at some point, the talk of making this an animated series. And the question of why isn't it animated? And if I'm going to be honest, I think we already know the reason why. And that's because if it was going to be animated, it would have been made by Disney. And Disney is very particular on its animated works. It could have very well been like a Disney animated show. But I think there are marketing decisions that made it so that it was going to be animated no matter what. I mean, it was not going to be animated no matter what. And before you talk about how, whether, I mean, I just want to make it clear that Hyperion, the publishing company, was already owned by Disney. So technically Disney already owned the rights to Percy Jackson, even before they bought Fox. So this was going to be the situation no matter what. Would an animated series have been better? I think the problem with animation is that people have their own styles. Animation is very expensive. It just worked a lot. It works very differently as well. So I can see why it's not an animated series, and I can also see why they would want to go for a live action series anyways. Number one, to maybe distinguish themselves from the movies. Although it is, I don't want to get too much into it actually. I still am interested to see what ultimately becomes of the series. I hope that it's good. I hope that Rick does know what he's doing. Whether or not the appearances of the characters actually change, or of the actors actually change, I don't know. I have no idea what they're going to do. I mean, there was talk of them potentially not doing anything with Walker or whatever. But I mean, Rick even does say that these actors are 100% my choice, my decisions, and I could not be happier with how things are going. If you have any doubts, wait until you see them act in the show. You'll quickly see why I chose them and why I'm so confident. And I think that is also valid. I mean, he is the creator of the series. And I think turning it into politics and turning it into what it is not is also not okay. I mean, let's be real with each other. Let's be honest with each other. Whether we agree or disagree with the casting, don't make it something that it's not. Okay? Don't turn it into something that it's not. Don't lie to try to boost your side, whatever side you are. Okay? Let's just settle with appearances do matter. But it is not politically driven. Okay? It really isn't. And I do believe that also. So yeah, let's just move on. And again, let's just keep it 100. Okay? Let's keep it 100. And at this point, it's too late. And you know what? We'll see what happens. in the series. So anyways, again, this will be the last time I talk about this. This is a long video, but I feel like it has to be to really get my points across, to really finalize this discussion once and for all. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. And peace out, guys. It's been a blast. Bye.